In this video, I'm going to show you how to install an attic ladder, and this is going to be an easy DIY step-by-step guide. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. The first step is determining the opening size that you got to get a ladder to fit in. And all we have to do here is measure the width, and right here we got 22.5, a little bit heavy, and the length here is 63 inches. Now when I built this house, I framed this out for this specific ladder. Now if you don't have a hole yet to install the ladder in, you can custom cut out the hole and whatnot, and you can add an actual rafter in order to supplement for a thinner ladder. But a word of advice, most trusses are set 24 on center, which gives us 22.5 inches in between them. So when you order a ladder, just make sure it fits in between your rafter space and you don't have to do a bunch of custom opening sizes in order to fit a ladder. As far as the actual length of the opening, that all is going to be determined on how far your ceiling is down to your floor, because here we have over 10-foot ceiling height, so we had to get a ladder that's a little bit longer in order to reach the floor, and I'll show you that more in a bit. So that's some things to consider. So always measure from your ceiling down to your floor to determine the ladder length that you need. Here we're 10 foot 9 inches, and the ladder I got will do up to 12 foot, so we're good to go. So now that I have the width and the length that I need, I'm going to go ahead and order my ladder. I ordered this ladder online. It actually showed up relatively quickly within a few days, and it was easy to unbox. Here's the ladder I'll be installing. This is a Louisville ladder. This is one of the best rated attic ladders. And as you can see, it's total aluminum, very nice. If you want to check this out, I'll put a link to it in the description below where you can pick it up for yourself. Now I need to get actual measurements here. The length is 62.25. and the width is 21 3/8. So as you just seen when I measured the opening, the rough opening is wider than this, and I have room to actually pad around up here so we don't have to put a lot of shims for this installation, but we'll still have to shim it tight where the bolts go. And this also came with our hardware pack with the lag screws, and it also came with this pole so we can grab a hold of it to pull the ladder down. So now that we got the hardware and this piece out of the way, we're going to pad around the opening. In order to pad this out so it's a little closer to the actual dimensions, I got 1/2 inch sheathing ripped down 3.5 inches wide. And I'm going to shoot it on the sides. Then I got a 3/4 board I'm going to shoot here towards the back, and that's going to pad it out appropriately. With the additional wood strips along the edges, we now have a slightly smaller opening, which is more appropriate for this size ladder. Before lifting the ladder into place, I'm going to screw a 2x4 or 2x6 or whatever scrap material you have on hand that will support the ladder. We're going to screw a board here towards this end, and screw a board here towards that end. We want to make sure we use at least 3.5 inch screws in order to hold this block on, because we want to make sure it penetrates into the rafter above so it supports the ladder just fine until we have it installed. The 2x6s are now going to give us a ledge to rest on even with the drywall. To install this ladder safely, I highly recommend you having help. It is definitely tempting to do this by yourself, but having a helper is definitely much safer. So he's going to help me lift the ladder up onto this lift. And if you don't have a lift, you can simply get a standard step ladder and then do it that way, but it's a little safer to have a lift like this. So we're going to lift it up on the lift before I get up in the attic. Right? And if you're wondering how much this weighs, it only weighs just a little over 50 pounds. So it actually isn't that heavy, but this just makes it so much easier and safer. The hardware came with this eye hook, 2 washers, and this nut, and we're going to fish this down through this hole here and secure it with the nut, because that's what we're going to grab to pull it open after we install it. After we have it installed, we're just going to take this pole and hook to it and pull it open. And again, this pole came with the ladder. I'm going to go up into the attic and then he's going to lift the ladder up to me using the lift. So I got to take a couple things with me when I go into the attic. I got a drill with a 5/32 drill bit. I got an impact driver with an 11mm socket on the end to drive the hex screws that came into the screw pack. And it also came with washers and bushings to go into the holes on the side of the ladder. And I also am going to have to shim it tight before placing the screw, so I'm going to take shims and a utility knife to cut the bands in order to lift the ladder down or open the ladder up into place after the ladder is extended. So I'm going to head up into the attic now. After I entered the attic, he took the ladder out of the opening. He then rolled the ladder into place in order to crank it up so I can grab it from above. And once I grabbed it from above, I simply pulled it up. Then I actually had him help lift it into place because it was hard for me to get up around that board on that end. After a little wiggling into place, it fell right on top of those 2x6s. You can see we are now setting in place. And as you can see, because we padded out on the sides, it shut the gap up pretty good. So minimal shimming here to get it tight. And actually right here, we're tight enough, don't need any shims here towards the front, just a little on the sides where the screws go. You can see the pre-drilled holes here. I'm going to take the bushing and place into the hole. I'm now going to take my drill and pre-drill this hole. I'm first going to place a washer onto the leg screw before installing it, and then install our leg screw to hold this into place. We got one here. Now we're going to hit all the ones we can around this edge before we open it up. To install these screws, I simply shimmed in between the sheathing we installed, and I also pre-drilled just like the other screws. Then I installed the screws directly into the rafter. I'm now going to cut this band. After I had the lag screw supporting the ladder, he then removed the blocks we installed to support the ladder until we got the screws in. And after that, he moved the lift out of the way. Okay, open sesame. Yep. All right. In order for me to exit the attic, he extended the attic ladder, then placed our extension ladder up into the attic opening in order for me to exit the attic. There were 2 straps sent with this hardware, but this would actually secure to the frame, and then you would take the wood screws that were sent, and this would hook onto the rafter as you're installing it. Again, because I had help here, I did not use this. As you can see, the ladder is too long and needs trimmed down. So I'm going to trim this down. I'm going to flip the ladder back on itself. And then we're going to fully extend it down. And we're going to get that measurement from the bottom of this ladder to the floor at this slope in order to give us our measurement to cut this section down to. If I extend my tape down at this same slope right to the floor, if I cut this to about 36.5 inches, looks about right. So I need to cut this section 36.5 inches from this point down. If you're using a sawzall or a hacksaw, it's always a good idea to wear safety glasses when cutting metal. Here's the amount I cut off the bottom of the ladder, and if you're enjoying this type of content, you may want to become a channel member, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but there you'll find additional content and exclusive content for my channel members. Now that we got it trimmed down to length, as you can see, it sits much better. We don't have a gap in between the joints, and that's what we want. So we now got to address installing the feet onto the bottom of the ladder. Something I did notice about these feet is that they do add extra length to the bottom here. So I actually had to trim a little bit off to compensate for this area because it will not slide beyond those. So you can see we have a gap here for now, but after this is installed, it's going to close that gap because it's going to lift it up a little bit here. And this came with the hardware. We have a bolt, a nut, and a washer that's going to be used to secure this on each side. I'm going to lift up the bottom leg here and then slide this underneath. Then we're going to set right back down onto the floor. All we have to do here is drill this out and install the bolt through the hole. The hole seems a little tight. I'm going to have to go up to 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to install the bolt through the hole. Now I'll just do the same to the other leg. And something you want to make sure you do here is adjust the leg to the concrete As you can see, if we put it tight, it's a little bit too high. We gotta slide it down, and that's flat on the concrete. All right, now we're nice and stable. Now that we have supporting feet, I can now finish placing the last couple of screws here on the side. So I'm gonna anchor these here real quick, and then we'll be totally secured with our frame to the opening. I want to show you everywhere I have screws. I have 2 back here in this bracket, 1 here, then 1 right here. Then over here we have 3 in the center, 1, 2, 3. Then we got 2 in this corner bracket. Then we have 1 here in the frame. Then there's 1 here in this bracket. So there's 2 kind of side by side. Over here we have 2 side by side as well. Then back here we have 1 here towards the back, and this one here towards the back. So there are several lag screws here holding this into place. Now I'm going to show you how to operate this. Because this is a tall ceiling, it's a little difficult to open and close the ladder coming out of the attic. One easy way you could do it is just take a step ladder to climb up on to fold this in and out. But if you want to use the pole, I found a way to do it. We'll start by folding this up like we typically would. And then on this rung here, I'll put my pole to push it right up into place. And then from here, we would just hook to our hook on the bottom, and then we would let it close. And that's one way to close it without getting up on the step ladder. But here's how I would open it. I'd pull this down, and I would then kind of do the opposite, except I'm going to go on the very top of the bottom set of steps. And then I would make sure that the pole caught right here on this step and lower it down to catch it like so. So you can do it using just the pole if you have a tall ceiling without the step ladder, just so you know. I would spray foam or self insulation into this crack, except it's in an unheated garage, so it's not that important. I then trimmed out around the attic ladder using 2 1/4 trim. I simply shot it into the rafter above, and as you can see, it trimmed out really nice, and it gave me a nice final product. I'm very happy with this attic ladder. If you've been following my channel for the past few years, you'll remember when I installed this subfloor in this attic. Well, this is what it looks like years later. I still need to contain this insulation, but it turned out to be a nice storage space. If you would like to see how I built this garage from start to finish, check out this video. It'll help you out.